Welcome to our Presbytery meeting from Inshirin Parish Church, and a warm welcome too to those joining us on our YouTube channel. Let us worship God. Our Bible lessons this evening will be read by Charlie Gothard from Dumbarton, Westkirk.
Evening is from Genesis 1, verses 26 to 27. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them, male and female, he created them. The second reading is from John 3, 16 to 17. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believed in him may not perish, but have eternal life. Indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Amen.
Thank you. In our reading from Genesis, we learn that we are all made in the image of God. I believe that means we have the unique characteristic of being able to relate to our Creator. This gives us the duty of acting as our Creator does, in seeing that what we do, as far as we are able, is very good rather than harmful. It also means that as we meet with one another, we are meeting with another who is made in the image of God. How does that affect how we relate to one another? With behaviour that is very good and not harmful, perhaps? Tonight, many people will be fearing the change that our congregations and we as individuals are facing, and so we turn to the words of Jesus. Words that are so familiar and yet I find so comforting. God so loves the world that Jesus is sent to us again and again to be with us, even, perhaps especially, in the dark days. Each year we have to walk through the darkness of Good Friday and endure the patient waiting of Holy Saturday before we experience the joy of resurrection at Easter. Is it possible that there will be resurrection for the Kirk after the pain of the past months and perhaps even the coming years? That should be the hope and prayers for us all. For many of us, the words of John chapter 3, verse 16 are the key to our understanding of Jesus' life and ministry. Nicodemus came to see Jesus by the cover of night. The scene holds our attention as we feel the need for secrecy coming up against the need to share the good news of Jesus Christ. This turns around when we read verse 17. The reassurance that Jesus did not come to condemn us, but to save us. Jesus' ministry is about inclusion, not exclusion, and our ministry should follow that of Jesus. Tonight, as we debate our Presbytery mission plan, let us hold before us the knowledge that we are all made in the image of God, and that it was for you and for me and for all the people living in our parishes that God sent Jesus Christ. And let us ask ourselves, will we be able to say that our conversation tonight will be inclusive and very good? Let us pray. Let us be still and rest in the peace of God. Let us be strong and trust in the tranquility of God. Let us be quiet and rejoice in the beauty of God. Let us be open and be drawn into the depth of God. Let us be ourselves and be enveloped in the heart of God, who has made all things, loves all things, redeems all things, today and always. In humbleness, let us confess our failings to God. Living God, we are sorry for the times when we have pretended that we do not belong to you. We are sorry for the times we forget that our brothers and sisters are also made in your own holy image. And we are sorry when we have let injustice prevail because we have been too afraid to speak out. Forgive us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Holy God, we remember those around the world facing misery this night, the people of Ukraine and all war-torn countries, people who are hungry, people who have lost loved ones and homes in Indonesia. And we pray that the world may respond to all in need with active love until all people enjoy life in all its fullness. Lord Jesus Christ, as we come before you this night, we constitute ourselves as Clyde Presbytery, a court of your own holy church. Help us as we debate to remember that you are the King and head of the church, and all we do should only ever bring honor and glory to your own holy name, in which we pray. Amen. Brothers and sisters, let us look forward in faith. Please be seated. And I trust that all attendance and apologies have been recorded on the sederent sheet. I also draw your attention to the notices, not least the ideas for the visit of the moderator of the General Assembly in April. The minutes of the ordinary meeting on the 13th of September have already been circulated, and I take them as read. Are there any points and accuracies on any of the pages? I'll go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So is the minute as a whole accepted? Thank you. Our next ordinary meeting will be on the 14th of February 2023 at a venue to be agreed, although I would put in a bid for this one. Order of business.
Moderator, the order of business is as in the print, apart from an extra item in the Business Committee meeting, a new number 15, which is to allow the congregations of Gourock, Old and Ashton, St John's in Gourock and Greenock St Ninians to worship together in Gourock, Old and Ashton on New Year's Day. Moderator, as you know, the plan had been to present the draft Presbytery plan for approval this evening. It became clear to the Planning Committee that the volume of comments and number of people wanting to speak and move motions was going to be very considerable, and it was felt that it was going to be impossible to get through the business this evening. So the Planning Committee are asking if the Presbytery would approve an alteration in the order of business tonight so that we would meet in conference session, and as we do that, that we would observe the same orders of the day as are outlined, Cluster A at 7 o'clock, Cluster B at 7:40, etc. If we don't get through each cluster, that we would guillotine the discussion on that cluster at the appropriate point and return to those clusters in order if there is time at the end of the meeting. We are not anticipating that anybody would move a motion, but we are anticipating that congregational representatives would be allowed to speak first in each of the cluster discussions. People are allowed to speak for 5 minutes, which we will tightly enforce, but we would greatly appreciate if people could keep their speeches to 3 minutes, if that is possible. And after people have made their comments, many congregations have already made written comments, but if people were able to send in written comments afterwards, that would be greatly appreciated. We are now almost certainly going to miss the deadline for presenting an approved plan to PIMPIG by the end of this year. We have been in touch with the Principal Clerk and people at PIMPIG, and whilst they are disappointed that we are not going to meet that deadline, they understand. They are understanding at the moment. I suspect that they will not be understanding forever. And people may well be wondering when we would then be presenting the plan for approval. And we think that the date which would be realistic to allow for consultation would be to meet in conference session for decision about the Presbytery plan on Saturday the 4th of February. I think we would meet at 10 or 10:30 in the morning, and we would work through until the evening if necessary in order to get the plan approved. If there are any questions, Moderator, I'd be happy to answer them, but I move the order of business and this alteration. Thank you.
Any questions? Do you accept the order of the day and the proposal to meet in conference session this evening?
John Murnan, Sherwood Greenlaw Church. Ken, thanks for kind of outlining the business plan. What I'm not very clear in, having spoken to a couple of others at the door, is what is the status of any comments or anything that happens tonight? What happens at the end of this? Does it go for another review and then come back? Is that what you're saying?
Sorry, John. Thanks for your question, John. The idea would be that all the comments would be noted. If people give us written confirmation of what they're saying, then that would be easier for us. But we will note down all the comments. We already have quite a volume of written comments, and these would be included in the discussions which will take place with congregations and clusters afterwards.
So does that mean more congregational visits still to happen or not?
Thanks, John. I can't speak entirely for the Planning Committee because it's up to the Planning Committee what they will do, but I think the understanding is that there will be areas where further discussion is necessary, and in those areas further discussion will take place. There will be some areas where there's no need for further discussion, and obviously in those areas there will be no further discussion.
And I think my last question is, so the plan that we've currently got is going to be rewritten, basically. Is that right?
No.
No?
I'm not sure who the right person to answer this question is, moderator. The plan we have is a draft plan. The draft plan will be considered again in the light of what is said tonight. There will be potentially changes to the draft plan. Some of it will be different, possibly. Some of it will not be different. It's possible that after all the discussion, that the committee will come back with something which is very similar to the current plan. But there will be further discussion, further opportunity for people to speak to and influence the planning committee, and then a final draft plan will be presented.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Ken.
Can I just say that this microphone will also be on? So if you've only got a short question, is it on now? If you have a short question, stand here, and that will stop the cuckoo clock effect of the lectern if it's only a short question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moderator, I just say something else. The pews at the front have been kept clear deliberately, and if you are wanting to speak in one of the cluster discussions, then it would be helpful if you came and sat near the front, because then we would lose less time in the discussion. Okay?
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming there are no further questions because there are no other calls and no other hands. So I would like to invite, well, I don't invite, I ask the Reverend Eleanor McMahon to stand. Before I formally welcome you to Presbytery, I have to ask you, do you adhere to your ordination vows? I do. Which were taken in the former Presbytery of Paisley, and I'm delighted to welcome you back, almost back home into the Presbytery of Clyde. I very well remember the wonderful evening we had at your ordination when you joined the then Presbytery of Paisley, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you back home. Thank you, Eleanor. Did you preach it? No. Can I invite Douglas Valance, long-term session clerk at Inverkip Parish Church, to lead us in a tribute to the late Alan Grant? And I ask Presbytery to stand. I'm not seeing anybody moving. We will defer to our next Presbytery meeting. Please be seated. We now have the leave-taking of three ministers to note. First of all is Scott McCrum, who is not here this evening. Scott came to us in 2018 as a part-time minister at Old Kilpatrick Bowling, and has now decided to, after time of ill health, chosen to step back from parish ministry. I understand that he's planning on spending some time travelling, and even in his absence, we wish him Godspeed in both his physical travels and on the spiritual journey that he will continue to take with our Saviour and Lord. Elspeth Mackay, would you please stand? If Elspeth is here, thank you. Elspeth, you have been with us for such a short time that I have not had the opportunity to meet with you, let alone get to know you. However, your journey with God now takes you back to the northeast, a part of Scotland which you are very well acquainted with, and I'm quite sure you will be a blessing in many ways to the new Presbytery of North East and the Northern Isles, and I wish you all God's blessings in your new post. I could misquote Oscar Wilde and say to lose one minister is careless, to lose three is foolish. But Ian McEwen, can I ask you to stand? Thank you, Ian. You have served the congregation and parish of Baljaffrey faithfully and innovatively since your ordination in 2008, and you have been a faithful servant to both this presbytery and the previous Presbytery of Dumbarton. You too have been reflecting on life and in general and ministry in particular, and you also feel that reflection needs to be more intentional, and so you plan to step back from parish ministry for a while to give you the space and time to discern where God is calling you to serve, and indeed how God is calling you to serve. So I also wish you and your family well on your spiritual journey, and I hope and pray that in time to come, another moderator of Clyde Presbytery will be welcoming you back home. Jonathan, I now invite you to stand. Jonathan, we are marking 10 years of service as an ordained minister of Word and Sacrament. Time forbids me for rehearsing all that you have done in those 10 years, so I thank you for the ways you have served the Church and our Presbytery, and offer you the sincere congratulations of both myself and Presbytery. And now it is my great delight to make a presentation to our candidates in training. So as I say your name, will you please come forward? Chris Barlas. Adeze Goziam Eboni. Stephen Henderson. Torsten Koenig. And Aaron Marshall. And is William here? He's here. And William McCulloch, please. Just wait there a moment. I hope that you do all feel supported by the members of the Ministry Committee in particular and by Presbytery in general, and therefore it is my delight to offer you Presbytery's support and financial assistance. Thank you all very much. We have 6 minutes left. I know. We have decisions made under powers for noting and committee decisions taken under powers also for noting. And we have 6 minutes for the Business Committee, Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Moderator. I thought I could get away with coming back up again. I move the Business Committee report as in the print with the additional item about the joint service in Gourock on New Year's Day.
And as we do only have 6 minutes, I would say any questions, please keep them succinct. Any questions? I move to the report. And I'm suggesting that we take items 1 through to 3 and 4 and 5 because they are noting together. Do you agree with deliverances 1 to 5? And deliverance 6 and 7. Actually, I decided I was going to take the deliverances 6 to 15 together because they're all dealing with worship for Christmas and New Year. So do you agree with deliverances 6 to 15? And then number 6, accept the notice of a motion for an amendment at our February meeting. That was rather underwhelming.
We're used to it.
Can I invite our Treasurer, Ian Stephen, please, to make his report, which again is taken as read. So at this moment, I'm calling for questions. Okay. Comments? With reference to Deliverance 2, do you approve of the change of the year end for Presbytery accounts from the 30th to 31st of December? Agree to Jim Gibson as independent financial examiner? And Deliverance for 4 is noting. So the report as a whole? And you said it without moving your lips.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Best report ever.
Yvonne, would you like to present the ministry report? And Anne, as we might just get to the mission report, do you want to come and sit further forward? Well, you're quite forward. Yeah.
As in the print, at this time there are many vacant congregations are not allowed to call until the Presbytery plan is implemented. Many presbyteries are allowing familiarisation candidates and probationers who have completed their training and placement to work under supervision of presbytery employment in flexible vacant charges. And we've got currently 2 candidates that fall into this category, and we're asking for Presbytery's approval to allow Mr. Dougie Adam and the Reverend Mark Boshoff to be allowed to take up these roles. And that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? So do you agree, do you approve the nomination of Mr. Stuart Wilson as a candidate in training for the ordained local ministry? My sincere congratulations to Stuart and thank you for being willing to serve the church in this way. And the Deliverance as a whole. Thank you, Yvonne. Anne, your report is for noting, so can I just have Presbytery's approval that you receive the report? Thank you very much. Again, another report without moving any lips. If you have not already had the time to do so, I would recommend to you the report from Stuart Davidson and the call for prayer. Okay, so we're going to leave stewardship and finance until later. Sorry, Robert. I'm not doing it deliberately. Well, we've got 2 minutes. We've got 2 minutes. So do you think we can do it in 2 minutes? Can I just ask, in Deliverances 4 and 5, is that for 2002 or is that 2023? 2022 or 2023?
It will come off their 2022 allowance.
Right, okay, thank you. So the report, any questions? Comments? Deliverances 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, the Deliverance as a whole. And I'd like to thank you, Robert, not just for the report, but also for the incredible support your committee has given the Lochside Family Worker Project. It is appreciated. Thank you.
Our pleasure, Moderator.
That was your best report ever, Robert.
Yes. Before we invite Jack McHugh to present the planning report, I would like members of the Planning Committee and the Ad Hoc Committee to please stand in their places.
Is that so they can be shot at?
In the introduction to the draft plan, you lay out the timeline that has led to this draft plan. It shows the amount of work that you as a committee have undertaken to reach this stage. Is the plan perfect? Of course not, for no document produced by a human mind or even a collection of human minds could ever be perfect. Have you undertaken this work diligently, sincerely, and with integrity and a desire to promote Christ's kingdom on earth? I have no doubt. Therefore, I would like to offer you my sincere thanks for bringing us to this place. Therefore, I would like to offer, and for bringing us to this place and for all the work you have undertaken in the past year. And I ask God's continual blessing upon you all. Thank you. You may be seated. Jack, I invite you to present the report. If we all do it. If we all do it.
Moderator, can I thank you on behalf of the Planning Committee for your very kind and gracious words. We really do appreciate all that you've actually said. It's a source of great disappointment to me and to the committee that we are unable to present the draft plan for approval this evening. And we do thank Presbytery for their indulgence in allowing us, in a sense, to move from the approval to further consultation. We have realised with the number of letters and questions and emails that have been sent through, there's still a consultation process to be completed. We want to get that done as quickly as possible. We want to do it properly. We want to present the best possible plan for Presbytery. And that is why we've arrived at this regrettable situation of asking that the plan should not be approved tonight. I have received a considerable amount of correspondence, which we will actually attend to in due course. It's our intention to work on that as quickly as possible, and that will be supplemented, of course, by comments that are made this evening. Moderator, I really don't want to say very much more. I think it's a listening exercise for us tonight. But I would just like to share a verse and a chorus from a hymn that we actually sung in Freeland Church on Sunday. It provided me with a reminder that this work is not our work. We're engaged in God's work. We're engaged in seeking to extend Christ's kingdom in Clyde. But this encouraged me, and I hope it encourages us tonight as well. The hymn was God Will Make a Way by Don Moen, and it goes like this. God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. He will be my guide, hold me closely to his side. With love and strength for each new day, he will make a way. By a roadway in the wilderness, he'll lead me, and rivers in the desert will I see. Heaven and earth will fade, but his word will remain. He will do something new today. Moderator, I present the report. I don't have anything to move in a deliverance.
And that is a reminder to Presbytery that we now move into a conference session, and so there will be no amendments accepted and no counter motions accepted. We are merely in consultation in conference session. And so from the Lyle Kirk, I invite Ross Finney to speak. And if you could, in your cluster, come and sit at the front. So cluster A, those who are wishing to speak, come and sit at the front.
Moderator, Lyle Kirk is extremely grateful to Presbytery for recognising that with the volume of concerned inquiries and without any disrespect to those who put the plan together, that we will have the opportunity for further consultation. Lyle Kirk's position in broad terms was that the draft plan, which those who read it from cover to cover will know, we were included in not just a cluster, but in a subgroup which came under the sort of subheading of Connect, with all churches from Greenock Well Park through Gourock and down to Skirmerley. We were broadly content with that, and more importantly, looking at the new situation, though we're trying to achieve the ability to carry on mission with far fewer ministers. One of the issues we were concerned about was the ratio of ministers to present adherents and to members of congregations, and that there was some balance. Now, I know these are rough numbers. They're not absolute. All of our records are not necessarily accurate, but these are the figures that we have to go on. And so coming down from 6.25 ministers to 4 in that cluster and looking at the priority areas and other demographics, that seemed fair and reasonable. I think we were concerned, Moderator, that the actual plan that was produced went further. Now, it looked on the face of it a fairly simple change. Well Park Midkirk was removed from the cluster, as was one minister. But when you went back to trying to establish what was the evidence for that, what was the basis for that, and what was the effect upon the general distribution, because we do believe in Lyallkirk that although we shouldn't get hung up with what Connect might or might not mean, as a basic principle, it is clear that with very much fewer ministers, the need for there to be more collaboration within groups is going to be more needed than ever before. So actually the removal of Well Park Midkirk had the effect of removing 25% of the allocated ministers, but only 13% of the total congregations. Now, I don't want to get hung up on particular numbers. The plan will never produce complete equality. That is simply not possible. But one of the principles I think we want to emphasize, Moderator, is that there should be some degree of equality and fairness in the allocation of resource that can genuinely be justified, both by reference to numbers of congregations and to priority areas. And the present allocation, whereby we have Lyallkirk united with Westburn and St Margaret's, my session has no objection to the good folk of any of these two congregations, none at all. But we do have a deep concern that that allocation produces a congregation that places a huge burden on whomsoever its minister might be. And so in looking carefully at the written submission we've made, we ask the committee to take seriously, right across the whole presbytery, the concern that there has to be some equality and some equal distribution of the scarce resource which we now have, and that to everybody it should be fair and equitable and recognise not just the numbers, but also the demographics and the priority areas that might require special skills, time and attention. I shall confine myself to that one point, because I do understand, Moderator, there are very many who will want to make different points, and I'm grateful for your perseverance in allowing us to make that point tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I also now call on Grace Kennedy from Greenock Well Park Midkirk. Again, could I say, if you're speaking in your cluster, can you please come to the front? Thank you. If you don't need to speak, you don't.
So, I realise the points that Ross Finney made, but from a Well Park Midkirk perspective, we were and are very happy with the proposals as set out in the draft plan. We are perfectly happy with the linkage with Hamilton, Bardrainy and Port Glasgow. As a congregation in Kirk Session, we look forward very much to working with Hamilton, Bardrainy. I think from a Well Park Midkirk perspective, we are very much involved in the mission in Greenock with a lot of the refugee Syrians, Ukrainians and also a very large Nigerian population. Also, as the town church, we have a huge responsibility with regard to all the civic duties that are undertaken within Greenock. And therefore, we are quite content that we share the ministry with Hamilton Bardrini. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just remind presbyters that if you are in agreement with the draft plan, that there is no need to speak. Thank you. So I call on Ewan Cameron from Inverkip. Okay, Ewan had intimated that he wished to speak. Rita Carmichael from Skermley and Weens Bay. Sorry? Okay, these are people who actually contacted us to say that they wish to speak, that they would be present here tonight, and they wish to speak. So that is all the notices that we have from Cluster A wishing to speak by non-presbyters. So if there are any now presbyters wishing to speak, we will just come forward and introduce yourselves, as John Murning very well did, with name and parish.
Good evening. I'm Alan Aitken from Gourock St John's in Cluster A. No, not Presbytery. No.
Okay.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. So we've been discussing our mission for several years now, since our current minister, Terry Peterson, was settled in the manse nearly 5 years ago now. We explored a vision of truly becoming a church for the community, indeed a church of the community, a hub which makes the gospel relevant in the daily lives of the local community. This vision emerged from prayer, discussion, study and our conversations as we conducted a community audit to learn how people in Gourock experience the church, how they interact with the church and what their dreams and opportunities were as well. Our buildings are located at the heart of downtown Gourock, with the most notable landmark of our clock tower, and the buildings are in use every single day of the week by a variety of organisations and groups. We've invested significantly in the infrastructure of our buildings with the National Heritage Lottery and Heritage Environment Scotland joint funding grant of £250,000 for the restoration of the clock tower, and committed to a heritage project centred around our sanctuary's stained glass windows, including our Faith and Hope window by Burne-Jones and William Morris. And as we celebrated our 175th anniversary, we installed a new stained glass window in celebration, supporting a local artist and creating more opportunities for artistic partnerships. We even had a group of church members who undertook an SQA accredited qualification in tour guiding and customer-facing skills to conduct tours of the church buildings and share our heritage and history with visitors, including cruise ship passengers. So much for the history lesson. We're not only good at spending other people's money on our church buildings, we also spend our own money too, with recent additions of 2 new boilers for the heating system, a new organ, along with the appointment of a gifted full-time organist in Philip Norris. And we are about to put a new kitchen in the church manse as well. Through the Heritage Project, we engage with local community groups, schools and interested individuals, hosting stained glass workshops to assist in the design of our new window. This, along with our community audit conversations and our participation in the locality area community engagement group, have been a real eye-opener to the possibilities of a fuller and wider community opportunity. Indeed, our monthly bowl and blether sessions and the other new mission partnerships are further demonstrations of this. We've engaged with the PMP with a degree of optimism and realism, and are generally in agreement with the direction of travel in terms of the future of the churches of Gourock as outlined in the draft plan. That said, unsurprisingly, we do have issues and concerns with several aspects of the draft plan which we documented to the Presbytery Clerk on the 14th of November. Specifically, those related to what support would be available to assist us on the journey with Cluster A, what the future of the cluster may look like with 2 ministers currently in Gourock with tenures beyond the current 5-year lifetime of the plan, how the inclusion of Inverkip and Skermley Weens Bay congregations was envisaged, that areas of deprivation in Larkfield, Braeside and the other areas served by St Margaret's and St Ninians appear underserved in the current plan. No obvious or specific consideration have been given to the needs of church youth organisations, certainly no reference, when in many of our churches today our youth organisations are actually where the majority of the young people in our churches today are to be found. The answers we receive can be summarised as follows. On support available, predominantly self-support and utilisation of your own local resources. On 2 ministers in Gourock and the inclusion of Inverkip and Skermley Wims Bay, the response was new news, not previously discussed nor indicated in the draft plan itself, for a larger union of the 4 churches in a team ministry structure under a team of 2 ministers. This was supposedly because of our enthusiastic support, which we do have for Connect, which so far hasn't really engaged to any true extent with Inverkip or Skermley Wims Bay. On the areas of deprivation and youth organisations, we were given essentially no answer. Interestingly, I joined a call hosted by Boys Brigade Scotland last week, where they had decided to encourage companies to engage with their churches to ensure their voices were heard. In conclusion, let me summarise from Gourock St John's. We are in broadly general agreement with what seems to be the direction of travel for the church in Gourock, though we have significant concerns for the areas of deprivation elsewhere in our cluster that run underserved in this plan. And for the avoidance of doubt, we are absolutely dependent upon our friends at Old Gourock and Ashton developing a shared vision for Gourock as equal partners with all that this entails.
Can I ask you to come to a conclusion,
Yeah,
please?
it's just going to be 2 seconds, yeah. That when we accept the remissioning of our church buildings as a community church and hub where different forms of worship and mission can be explored and not just a community centre. And finally, we really do feel that a more logical grouping of churches serving Port Glasgow, Greenock East End, Central Greenock, Lerkirk St Margaret's, Gourock, churches, Larkfield, Inverkip and Skermley Wims Bay is worthy of further exploration. And that's our feedback as far as the plan goes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We really do need to stick to the strict 5-minute rule so that we allow all those who wish to speak to speak. I invite you to come forward. And again, to introduce yourself, please.
Cathy Donaghy, Presbytery Elder for Hamilton Badrenny Church, Port Glasgow. Moderator, I would just like to say that Hamilton Badrenny are happy with the proposed linkage with Wellpack, Midkirk and Greenock, and also that we are grateful for the opportunity to continue with the mission plans that we have for Upper Port Glasgow, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. But could I do please ask those who are happy with the plan not to come forward and speak? Thank you very much. It is taken, if nobody speaks from a particular congregation, it is assumed that they are in agreement with the plan. Thank you.
Moderator, Moira Hellier, Presbytery Elder and Session Clerk from Greenock St Margaret's. We thank the committee for the work put into the draft Presbytery mission plan. We recognise this as a massive task, but we do feel, however, that there have been inadequate communication between the committee facilitators in our Kirk session or our cluster. The consultation visits with open-ended questions and no proposals to interact with or discuss have meant that we've not felt it easy to engage. Receiving the proposal in the format we did with such a short timescale to consider has also made it far more difficult for us to bring the congregation along with us, as they now feel this is simply a done deal being imposed on us. The proposal we've been included in was not discussed in any way at our meeting. It didn't have to be this way, and we'd like to record that we would have been happy to discuss proposals along the way so that this would not have been a surprise with a rushed response. Having said that, we're willing to go in part of the direction indicated in the draft plan and to explore the union with the Lisle Kirk, but we don't feel that a union including Westburn is maybe in the best interests of our 2 priority area parishes. In a plan that's supposed to be about mission, this proposal is actually counterproductive to the mission of the church, as it leaves 2 significant areas of deprivation understaffed and reduces ministry in our cluster area below the threshold that is sustainable for ministry in deprived areas. leaving us with serious concerns about the proposed plan for Cluster A. There's unease circulating as people perceive the church leaving behind deprived areas and small churches. An option that would make more sense for our perspective here in Greenock would be for Westburn and the Wellpark Midkirk to unite, thus having one minister for the geographically and populationally small yet very deprived parish, and then for St Margaret's and the Lyellkirk to unite with one minister. We recognise this would require the two Port Glasgow churches to pursue a relationship which seems to be more sensible. We can see the positives for the mission of the church in a union of St Margaret's and the Lyellkirk, and we look forward to continuing to pursue our emerging vision for mission in the St Margaret's area, with leadership, more support and less burden of bureaucracy to be borne by the same people. We'd also like to record that we value Connect and that the next round of planning in 5 years may well encompass more of that original vision. So we propose formalising a parish grouping that would enable continued building of the relationships across the whole area. We wouldn't want to lose what we've built with the other 5 parishes, and we hope that however the configurations of unions work out, we can continue to build towards that larger vision for the church. Again, thank you for your work.
Thank you. And seeing that you have prepared your report clearly on a computer, would you please email that into the office? Oh, that's what I call efficient. So anybody who has not already emailed in what they're saying tonight, please do email them into the office. It will make it much easier for us to pass on the comments to the Planning Committee.
I'm Jennifer Bogan. I'm an elder in Greenock Westburn, as well as a Presbytery reader and corresponding member of Clyde Presbytery. And I've been asked to speak on behalf of the church session of my church. Church session of Westburn Parish Church met on the 2nd of November and had some initial discussions on the draft Presbytery plan. Because the plan had only been received that afternoon, we held another meeting on Tuesday the 8th, after elders had a chance to read the document and reflect on the response. And the meeting was also open to members of our congregation, and a number attended and contributed to the discussion. Our church session is broadly in agreement with the proposal for Cluster A, Section A4, which includes our church, and we are willing to enter into negotiations with Lyellkirk and St Margaret's regarding a union. The draft plan proposes the closure of all the Westburn church buildings, and we accept that the church needs a very large amount of money spent on it, so we can see why it's proposed to categorise it as B and to be disposed of. However, we would want to retain our halls and have them designated as A. We strongly feel that the resources they offer as modern, flexible, well-used, well-equipped, recently refurbished spaces to high standard. We had a break-in and they've been refurbished since then, that they are necessary to the ongoing work of the proposed union and for the development of mission within our wider community. Our halls are currently used by a wide range of organisations because of their location on the main route into town centre, because of their access to both bus and train services, strategically placed close to proximity to other key stakeholders in the area, such as our Gown Hospice and West College Scotland campus, and to transport links. If our buildings are closed, we don't believe that the current Lyellkirk building in Union Street will provide sufficient hall space for all the church and community organisations who currently use the premises of the two congregations. This would result in a substantial loss of facilities for the whole community and opportunities for outreach, which the current premises of the two churches provide. We've taken advice on the feasibility of retaining the halls separate from the church, and we've been advised that this could be possible. We sent an email seeking Planning Committee's view, but obviously they've had a lot of other submissions as well, and we've not yet had a reply. And so it now appears that they're going to consider the plan further before bringing a further updated plan to Presbytery. We would like to see the retention of our halls included in the revised plan. We were disappointed that we had a very short time space in which to discuss the draft plan. However, I think we welcome the fact that from now on we're going to have a little bit more time to look at the plan again, that the Planning Committee are going to look at it again, and that we might have an opportunity at that stage to discuss with other congregations within our cluster or even subsections of our cluster, to see if we can get some consensus and hear each other's perspective and ideas, some of which we're hearing tonight. That's all I've got to say.
Is there anybody else from Cluster A that would like to speak?
Moderator Karen Harbison from Westburn Parish Church, and also interim moderator at Skelmerley, Weemsby and Inverkip. It's obvious from what people have said this evening that there is still a lot of consultation and discussion to be had in Cluster A until we get to a place where the plan encompasses all the ideas, the vision and the hopes of our congregations and a way of being missional in our communities. So my point really is a question to the convener, if that's all
Questions
right.
are always appropriate.
To ask, how does the process go from here? Which I think was partly what John was asking. Would it be the intention of the committee that the facilitators previously appointed to each cluster would now come back and arrange meetings with individual Kirk sessions, with smaller groups, whole clusters, or is it up to local parties to take the initiative and start that conversation based on the information we already have? It's really just trying to clarify how we move forward so that we get to a point by February the 4th or before that we actually can come together on. Thank you.
Before I invite the convener to answer that question, I just want you to know the reason I was smiling is not because I think everything is wonderful with the Presbytery plan, but I just saw the young folk from the Cubs leaving the building, and it always gladdens my heart. Convener.
Thank you, Moderator. Thanks to Karen for asking that question. It's our intention to move on the responses that we've already had, and obviously any responses we get this evening. Some of the speakers have actually identified issues that have already been communicated to us, and it's our intention to hold the meeting very, very quickly. If there's a requirement for us to revisit a particular part of a cluster, then we will certainly do that. If we can resolve the matter by answering questions, we will certainly do that. What we actually want to do is to ensure that satisfactory answers are actually given to anyone who raises a question or an observation. We don't see that it's necessary to revisit the clusters in their entirety. I think some of the stuff that we've actually received can actually be answered by telephone calls or by a written response. And it certainly would be our intention that the people who carried out the original consultation will actually return to continue that consultation because they have been with that from its birth, and it seems a pointless exercise in many ways to involve new people in that consultation. They will not know what's actually been said previously. And I think that's, certainly to my simple mind, that seems to be the best approach. And we will put that into practice very, very quickly because we're conscious that we'll be approaching the holiday season very soon, and we need to get something organised so that we can actually meet this new deadline that we have. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Any other questions specifically for Cluster A? Thank you. We have managed to move through Cluster A in less time than we intimated, so please note that whatever time you were given for your cluster, it's now 10 minutes earlier, and that may change as we go through. So I invite those from Cluster B who would like to speak to come and sit in the front pews. And there are some folks that I already have intimation that they wish to speak, so I call upon Elizabeth Coburn from Inshinnan Parish Church, and if Alan Benny needs to speak, I ask him to stand by. I understand he won't be speaking.
Moderator, I am here tonight to represent the views of the Kirk Session of Inchinnan. My name is Elizabeth Coburn. If I was asked to describe the response of our Kirk Session to this plan, I would say confused.com. In Plan 1, we were to be aligned in some form with Erskine Parish Church, which is that way. In Plan 2, we are to be united with Renfrew North Church, which is that way. What is, however, certain about both these plans is that nothing is going to happen to Inchinnan Parish Church for an unascertainable period of time, as all three of those churches are in unrestricted tenure. So it could be 5 years, 10 years, or maybe even 15 years before anything happens. In my submission, that is not a plan. There is so much about this situation which is unsatisfactory. As a Kirk Session, we always seem to be saying, we don't know the answer to that. One thing is clear, that this plan is proving divisive, and the congregation and Kirk Session need certainty as to our plan for the future. In this plan, our building has been classified as Category A, but we feel that we need a commitment from Presbytery that this will continue to be the case if the plan is implemented in 5 years or 10 years' time. Without that assurance, how is the Kirk Session expected to plan and budget for those years to come? The Kirk Session believes strongly that the Church should have a presence in Inchinnan in the future to allow us to develop our mission in the community and to provide opportunities for all age groups and adapt to the needs of our evolving congregation. The congregation have valid concerns that in 5 or 10 years, when the plan can be implemented, we could then be told that the plan had been changed and Inchinnan Parish Church is now to be closed and sold off, for example, for housing development. We are going to struggle to get support if we have to say to our congregation, we can't answer that question as to what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years' time. We have great facilities here which we have worked hard to get. If you'd been here 25 years ago, you would have had to check if your seat was wet and avoid the buckets on the floor to catch the rain from our roof. We formulated a plan to stop that. We worked through it and we achieved it. We changed the roof into a pitched roof. We know from that experience that our members and the community will support a plan, but we need to be able to give them answers as to where we are going and we can't do that as things stand at the moment. We are being expected under this plan to carry on as we are for an unspecified time, maintain a full-time minister, maintain the premises, and yet adapt to meet the changing needs of the congregation and the community. The Church of Scotland recognise that the status quo is not going to be a sustainable model for the future, but we feel that Inchinnan Parish Church are being asked to do just that, maintain the status quo for an unspecified number of years. We feel that we are being left in an impossible position through this uncertainty. And my personal fear that if that issue is not resolved, it is going to suck the lifeblood out of our church. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Ian Morris, are you wishing to speak? Okay. Thank you. Jim Holmes from Kilmacombe, St Columba, sorry.
Jim Holmes, Session Clerk, St Columba, Kilmacombe. Moderator. The first thing I would like to say is that our Kirk Session and congregation in St Columba realise that a union of the two churches in Kilmacombe is, in fact, in the interest of the community. There was a previous vote earlier in the year on a basis of union, which fell with a congregational vote in our congregation of 70% against, despite the majority of the Kirk session being in favour. However, there was a feeling of being rushed into the vote and a question over the tenure that would be available. The Kirk session now believe that a vote would be in favour of a union at this time, and it would be in the interest of carrying out God's mission within the whole community. However, we are concerned over the categorisation of the St Columba building being that of B, and hence not the preferred building. According to the AMBA results, St Columba achieved the higher score of 83% against the Old Kirk's 75%. And whilst both church buildings are central to the village, St Columba is easier to park at with a large car park that also has electric chargers with it, as well as ample available street parking. The community piazza area is also adjacent to the church building, and this has helped determine St Columba as the preferred building for our current ecumenical Christmas celebrations. St Columba's vision for mission is of a town centre church, ecumenically engaged in developing community mission and outreach. The local ecumenical partnership has restarted after COVID restrictions were lifted. This involves all the churches within Kilmacombe. And this coming Christmas, the partnership have agreed on the use of the St Columba building as their preferred option after an open-air carol concert in the adjacent piazza, and then an invitation for those attending to go up to our church for a short service of worship and refreshments. On a missional basis, there was a comment made that there was no chaplaincy associated with the congregation and St Columba's High School. But this is factually inaccurate, as St Columba's School has always used the building on a weekly basis and for special events. Before the last incumbent left, a youth ministry worker was employed by the congregation who carried out chaplaincy work, as well as running youth clubs and running summer mission weeks. The present locum has been involved with school assemblies in St Columba's, remembrance reflections, and has been asked to conduct Christmas celebrations in the Kilmacombe Primary School. It would be hoped that under a new minister that this could be further developed. And we know a submission has been put into Presbytery by St Columba's School, and I'm sure it reinforces some of these points. Another ecumenical and missional event is the long-standing weekly meeting that has members from other local churches joining for a time of worship and fellowship, usually with a guest speaker, and one recently from the Port Glasgow Food Bank, which the church supports. We know that there would need to be adaptations to the building, perhaps a more eco-friendly heating system, an upgraded AV system, but we do not claim to be a perfect building, just the one that has the greatest potential for furthering Christ's mission in Kilmacombe. We acknowledge that there had been agreement to abide by the decision from the group of 3 people from Glasgow Presbytery, but the costs that they gave to fix the water ingress from the tower and the issue with the hall roof were grossly overpriced. Indeed,
Can I ask you to draw to a close, please, Jim?
Right.
Thank you.
Indeed, we found that there was quite a considerable difference between what they said as estimates and what actually turned out to be the cost. We therefore propose that St Columba is best placed in terms of location and facilities to be the church that remains open, so that both congregations can unite in enacting an exciting, multifaceted vision for mission and turning it into a reality within Kilmacombe.
Thank you. Sorry, a late request to speak, and I didn't take Dick Hughes in order from Bridge of Weir, St Machars, Ranfurly.
Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be delighted to know that for some reason or other I had it in my head I would only get 2 minutes to speak. So this will be
God
short,
bless you.
short, sweet, and
yes, you don't need to take your 5 minutes.
Short, sweet, and hopefully to the point. This is the comment of the Kirk session of St Machars, Ranfurly Church on our proposed amalgamation with Freeland Church in Bridge of Weir. At our meeting of 8th November, the proposal to amalgamate the two churches contained in the draft Presbytery mission plan was accepted, albeit reluctantly, as being the only way forward if the Church of Scotland is to survive in the longer term within the village. There was, however, disappointment and a degree of dismay that St Machars Ranfurly was to be declared a Category B building, effectively for disposal. Whilst it does not enjoy the central geographical position of our neighbour church, it is well maintained, it benefits much more from the sunlight, and was thought to be more aesthetically pleasing than the other. We also have the village war memorial situated immediately outside. Further, it was felt that any decision to dispose of our church should be delayed until it was established what works would be required to render Freeland Church suitable for the accommodation of both congregations, and if possible, the community groups and organisations who currently use St Machars Ranfurly Church Hall. It was further decided that any amalgamation would have to be clearly presented as a union of equals, and that we in no way wish the local population to be given the impression that one church and its minister was taking over the other. We currently have a subcommittee examining the issues which will arise as a result of any amalgamation, and they have been in discussion with their counterparts at Freeland with a view to addressing these fears. But at the moment, we work quite closely with the other church on a number of things. For example, sharing youth organisations. On some occasions, they're in our hall. On other occasions, they are in theirs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick. And I call on Ian Barber from Johnson High.
Moderator, members of Presbytery. First, I'd like to say that we concur with the arguments which have been put forward by Eldersley Kirk, but by other means, I understand, in regard to the proposed unions in Cluster B, specifically around Johnson and Eldersley. But my plea to you now is on behalf of our church building, and speak on behalf of the session and the congregation. Johnson High Parish Church was built in 1792 on lands graciously donated by George Ludovic Houston, Esquire, Laird of Johnston. It is a beautiful building structured with a hexagonal shape, unusually. The Few Charter for the graveyard is dated 17th June 1791, and that makes it one of the oldest documents relating to the town. There are 460 graves, plus one mass grave, unmarked, to take bodies from the cholera plague of 1832. We believe approximately 1,500 persons were buried in the graveyard, and that's excluding the mass grave. The graveyard itself is a magnet to people from around the globe, seeking to trace the final resting place of long-lost relatives. Many of those graves were identified and located in collaboration with the Johnson History Society. Due to the seating capacity of the church of 950, it was often used for public meetings until the first town hall was built in Johnson in 1869. The church and halls were also used in recent years while the new town hall was being built. The central position in Johnson of Johnson High is easy to get to by foot and on public transport, and is visible to the populace of the parish. Its spire features the town clock and can be seen from most parts of the town, and the bell can equally be heard throughout the local area as it calls people to worship. Over the last several years, new families have been drawn to the church and have also joined our roll. They stayed for the fellowship, but more importantly, they came for the building. Of course, a building that is 230 years old requires regular maintenance, but the congregation has happily kept up with that maintenance over the years and stands ready to care for their beloved place of worship in the future. One of the striking features of the building is the stained glass windows in every lower alcove. But Johnson High is more than a beautiful building. It provides a spiritual home for 85 to 90 worshippers, and also for an average of 80 worshipping online every week. We pray that others will be drawn to the love we all know in Jesus Christ. Technology has been introduced, including audiovisual equipment and a modern sound system. Sunday morning services are live streamed and also uploaded to YouTube. Worship is led by an organ and a praise band with a mixture of traditional and modern hymns. We have a Sunday school of 14 children who join with the praise band playing percussion instruments. We have a diverse ethnicity and age range within our congregation, with many falling into the most vulnerable category in the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. Due to the close proximity of the church, people can attend worship, and also the youth organisations by foot, as many do not have the financial means to own a car. To date, we have supported 4 families from decorating their whole flat to sourcing and providing furniture, clothes, etc. We have also provided families and individuals with financial aid for heating their homes and feeding their families, and still maintained our church building and given our full allocation of around 60,000 each year. Our food bank is open to anyone in need of food, toiletries, etc. We also work with Johnson Business Consortium, helping families first. Johnson High Parish Church has played a vital part in growing God's kingdom for many generations, and still has a massive potential to continue that for many years to come. We are asking you to reevaluate the designation of the Johnson High Parish Church building from Category B to Category A. We place ourselves in God's hands and in yours. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ian. Jim Glenn, I have a note that you were going to speak if required. Okay. Well, I was going to open to anybody else from Cluster B that would like to speak. To introduce yourself to Presbytery, please.
Thank you, Moderator. Tim Maynard, Minister of Barhead St Andrew's Parish Church. I think every single representative of a church here could give a reasoned case with statistics and petitions and campaigns as to why our particular church building should be kept open. It feels slightly, it kind of sticks in my throat, some of that personally, if I'm going to be honest. I don't really feel that's the gospel imperative for us, so we're not going to go down that road. Broadly speaking, we're in agreement with the ministry allocation. In fact, we are in agreement that the ministry allocation for Barhead and Neilston should be reduced from 3 to 2. To my mind and to the mind of our Kirk session, it feels very much still as if this is a plan that's being driven by old school Presbytery mission planning, those ministers on full tenure, and I speak as a minister on full tenure. I think this is a nettle the Church of Scotland should have grasped many years ago. I think it's completely out of date for our modern situation. That's for another time. Somebody needs to take that to the General Assembly. But it feels as if we're trying to do Presbytery mission planning based on when ministers are stepping down, and that's completely wrong. We believe strongly in a team ministry. I'm very disappointed that there are very few team ministries put forward as part of this plan. Parish ministry is dying. across Scotland. It's absolutely dying. One minister, one parish is dying. We believe strongly there needs to be new ways of doing things. The best missional opportunity for Barhead and Neilston, as supported by our Kirk session, as supported by Neilston Kirk session, is for a team ministry with 2 ministers serving the whole parish and sharing that ministry. We believe in that very strongly. We very strongly disagree with the categorisation of B provisional. It's not in the Act. We believe it's completely against the principles. The Church of Scotland have said all buildings should be categorised as A or B by the end of the plan. B provisional is a fudge, a complete and utter fudge and a dereliction of duty. And to say that we have to decide at a local level how our buildings are disposed of is completely and utterly wrong. It will not bring us together, it will drive us apart. So we strongly contest the categorisation of B provisional. We believe there's a strong case for retaining both church buildings in Barhead. There were 3 church buildings in Barhead up until 8 years ago. Suddenly we're going from 3 down to 1. Both churches are very viable. We want to work very closely with Barhead Borough and with Neilston as well. We've been doing that. We've been meeting over the summer. It's not been easy. None of this has been easy, has it? But we're meeting and we're putting ourselves in that position to work together as best we can for the missional opportunities of our community. And we believe there is a strong case for retaining both of those buildings. I think that's everything. Oh, yes, the other thing was the agreed criteria on page 5. There's a long list of agreed criteria on page 5. I fail to see that evidenced within the decisions that have been made within the plan. The only criteria I can see is priority areas and funerals. Funerals? What's that got to do with anything? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else? I think, yes, we're going to wait until everybody from the cluster has spoken. Thank you. Anybody else wanting to, if you come and introduce yourselves, thank you.
Philip Wallace, Renfrew North, and moderators. Unsurprisingly, I'm going to talk about the recommendations as they relate to Renfrew North Church. Firstly, can I say that we are in agreement with some of the recommendations that are put forward for us. We don't mind progressing towards a union within Shinnon Church, and we don't mind sharing ministry. But what we do find puzzling is the recommendation that the Renfrew North buildings are designated Category B, that is, they are no longer required and are to be disposed of. We can understand such a recommendation if there were some facts or figures to back it up, or if major repairs were needed, or if it was a building that was rarely used. But this doesn't reflect the reality at Renfrew North. The very brief description in the draft plan at page 25 of life at Renfrew North includes the words, "a busy church with healthy youth organisations." These include brownies, guides, and one of the largest BB companies in the battalion, and contribute towards the footfall figure of 300 under-18s that are in the buildings each week. The busy church also includes a daily coffee bar which helps to combat loneliness and acts as a warm space that can be accessed by all who need it. The Forget-Me-Not Cafe serves the social needs of dementia sufferers and their carers and is supported by Alzheimer's Scotland. These church organisations and Sunday worship, along with other hall-lets, contribute to an average building footfall of 1,000 people each week. The Planning Committee already has a huge list of things that happen at Renfrew North, and we would urge it to return to it and examine all that would be lost should the buildings close, and to ask itself why you would close a building that currently offers a huge amount to the local community and clearly has plans to do more. Our local councillors, MSP and MP, all understand the important role that Renfrew North plays in the local community, as do the people who have signed our online petition that's reached nearly 1,700 signatures. Well-equipped spaces in the right places is a well-loved phrase of the General Trustees, and the Renfrew North building itself is well-equipped, partly through necessity after flood damage through COVID, and part through taking the opportunity to upgrade, including the commercial standard kitchen, which will be used by the charity Blue Triangle from the new year to equip cooking skills for those moving from homelessness to accommodation of their own. The Renfrew North buildings are located in the very centre of the most deprived areas of Renfrew. They are in the right place to help those from the streets and the neighbourhood that often drop in for a cup of tea or a chat or some practical help. These are the things that are happening now. The comments also on page 25 about both churches having much to offer the youth and younger adults in the town and having two churches to offer a theological choice in the town make no sense if one of the churches is closed. A consultation visit by the Presbytery Planning Committee commended Renfrew North for its mission plan and the fact that we showed clearly how our current mission and future mission were very much aligned with the 5 marks of mission. This is our evidence, all verifiable, that suggests that Renfrew North buildings should be retained. There is no evidence or justification given in the plan on page 25 as to why the building has been designated Category B, and all that I have described would be lost. And so my question is a simple one. It's one I've asked Jack before. Why has Renfrew North been designated Category B?
Anyone else from Cluster B?
Pamela Gordon, Minister of the Bourke Church in Barrhead. I was very pleased to hear what Tim said, because we are in agreement that 2 churches in Barrhead are necessary. The great thing about being a Minister of the Bourke Church is that we have overcome a lot due to COVID. We have continued having our junior church, and our numbers are thriving in that area. But just to lay that aside for a minute, I do have a couple of questions. One in particular is that Tim talked about team ministry. My concern is there a structure for team ministry? Because if there is to be a team ministry, which I'm quite open to, what's the structure for it? Because I don't want to, as a minister, to go into this blindly. And also, I'd like to speak on behalf of my elders who have been told by the committee that it is down to us which church is to close in Barrhead. How can that be put in the hands of my elders, that they have to make the decision of which church is to close? Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you for keeping it succinct, because if we wish to have the answers to Cluster B answered before we move on to Cluster C, Matt, could I ask you also to keep it succinct? Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew Ritchie, Minister at Neilston Parish Church. So I complete that set for you, and I will, of course, keep it brief. We are, as has been mentioned, more or less in agreement with the plan. The idea of moving the 3 churches in the area into 2, and the idea of that being a team ministry, is one which we have been able to explore positive visions of. It is, in fact, an inspiring opportunity, we believe, for the area, and is an area where we think there should be more representation within the Presbytery plan. We recognise that in Neilston we have 2 church buildings and are prepared that they should be moved down to 1. That planning has already been in place for several years, although the choices of which buildings to retain are not clear. Our concern does come, however, with the categorisation of all 4 buildings in the cluster being brought down to Category B, provisional, and with the idea that we should sort that out amongst ourselves. Also with the concept that there should only be 2 buildings, one in Neilston and one in Barrhead. If this is, I do have the question, which I think will be answered because my 2 colleagues have already asked it, what the standing of B provisional is and whether PinPeg will accept that. But I suppose my main point is to say that either Presbytery should decide what buildings are closed and communicate that, as has been done elsewhere, rather than asking us to bite the bullet and do it ourselves, something which, as Tim says, will drive us apart, not bring us together. But if it is our decision, and then the decision must be allowed that we maintain more than 2 buildings. Barrhead is a large place, we have 2 viable congregations, and having 1 congregation with 3 worshipping communities is, I believe, a valid way forward for us. Therefore, either can we stop messing about with provisional grades that we do not know whether they have standing, or can we allow us to decide how many of those buildings we maintain ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you. Jack, I invite you, or indeed for you, to nominate a member of your committee to answer the questions. Oh, sorry. Did I overlook someone wanting to speak from? Jonathan was wanting to speak as a member of the planning committee. So that was why I was inviting Jack to speak, inviting Jonathan if he wished to.
I think Jonathan, he wanted to address a specific thing. I think you should do his specific.
Okay, if you do your specific. We have before us the question, why is Renfrew North a category B? Why team ministry and why provisional, as far as I understand it from those comments?
To consult with my colleague.
Thank you, Moderator. Thank you, Presbyters, for giving me a moment. Jonathan Fleming, Minister of Lyellkirk and a member of the, a co-opted member of the Presbytery Mission Committee, having served with the ad hoc Mission Plan Task Group. Just wanted to try and answer 2 of those questions just now, with regards to the team ministry question and to the B provisional question. Beginning with the team ministry, the answer to your question with regards to why there are not more team ministries in the document is because, despite approaching Faith Nurture for a proper clarified basis of team ministry, we are still to receive that. And we have asked on repeated occasions for that, and have still to get a concrete version of what the basis of team ministry looks like. We are aware that at the present, team ministry the basis at the moment has certain things which will again raise questions because they're still determining how you're able to determine who would be the moderator of a United Kirk session or for team with the United Kirk session. And what that obviously means is that one minister over others in the team would be the moderator of the session, and that's not something which is interchangeable as easily as perhaps some would like. The idea of co-moderatorship is something that's been discussed, and about tenure as the moderator of a session. And so these are questions which we're still seeking answers for. And that's the only reason why team ministry has not been included. We didn't want to give you the hope that could be achieved and then not be able to give you the answers that you sought. But we have very much got the vision of there being team ministries going forward, and we hope and pray that that basis will be available soon. Turning our attention to B provisional, the reason why B provisional is there is because there are situations where we are trying to find out, in conjunction with everybody in an area or a cluster in question, how they see the best way forward and to determine the best way forward without that definitive answer coming right now. The General Trustees at the moment are quite terrified by the number of buildings that are potentially going to be coming up for disposal and are asking that we stagger those in the first instance. because of the number of buildings that are going to be coming potentially onto the open market as a result of disposals. And B provisional is not an attempt to stall that for some congregations, but to allow for a short period. And we've now been asked to determine what that provisional category would mean in terms of a timescale to allow for a concrete answer to be produced much sooner than later. So I hope those two things are helpful, and I'm going to pass over to Jack to discuss Renfrew North.
I'm going to step in there. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I think responses to questions about individual congregations and their category A or B should be left for further consultation when the Presbytery Planning Group come and meet with you. And for once, the clerk and I are of one mind on that. So we move on. Sorry. Minute that, please, Karen. We move on to Cluster C. No, you're not. We're not answering it. We're not answering a question about a specific category of a specific church. We'll do that in the consultation. We're moving on to Cluster C. So I invite those who wish to speak for Cluster C to come forward. And yes, of course, once your cluster has been discussed, you're free to leave. I should have made that clear.
People are leaving without being told they can leave. Hugh coming down here. Oh, here's Graham coming. Graham, want to come up here?
I thought Graham was cluster.
You want to come up here, Graham?
Information that Kenneth Ritchie from Paisley Abbey wishes to speak.
Moderator, Clerk, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I was interested when I was listening to the elder from Inshinnan saying that confused.com was perhaps the best description of the discussions that had taken place at her Kirk session. I would have to say it's the same experience for the Kirk session at the Abbey. We accept that there is much within the narrative of the report with which the Kirk session can happily agree, principally because a lot of what is contained within the narrative are suggestions which we have been trying to pursue for the last 15 years without any great success with the General Trustees, with Historic Scotland and with Renfrewshire Council. My concern, and I'm sorry, Moderator, to return instantly to the same question which has been addressed on so many occasions by so many speakers this evening, but our concern is over our categorisation. Our first concern, I have three. First concern is over the categorisation of Paisley Abbey as a B provisional. It's an internal contradiction to some of the points which are then raised in the narrative, that there could ever be any contemplation for disposal of the building. The narrative which is attached makes no sense if that is in contemplation. But worse than that, there is in fact an internal contradiction, even more so within the document itself, because whilst we are category B on page 40 of the report, we are in fact category A on page 89 of the report. So at the very least, the Kirk session would like some clarification as to which category we fall in. If we're category A, the narrative certainly makes more sense, except perhaps for the comment that says that there are existential questions to be answered. If we're category B, I'm afraid the narrative makes no sense at all. Our second concern is in respect of the recommendation that we have a transition ministry. Now, the Kirk session has not been able to discern from the Presbytery plan any rationale for moving to a transition ministry. And indeed, on looking at what information we could find, which is available on the Church of Scotland website about transition ministry, it does not seem to be the best way forward for Paisley Abbey. Indeed, within the plan itself, there are only 3 transition ministers proposed. The others are in respect of congregations which are entering union, one in our own cluster and one in cluster E. We have concerns about the descriptions which we've been able to find in relation to transition ministry, and the rather tenuous link it seems that a transition minister appears to have with the Kirk session, rather than the relationship it has with the Presbytery or the IMTG. We're concerned because we have been pursuing a variety of different strategies over the past 15 years, particularly to try to raise more money to support a building which was, well, founded in 1163. And there aren't that many buildings within the Presbytery, I think, which still have 12th, 13th, 15th, 19th and 20th century parts to them. These cost a lot to maintain. And what we're concerned about is that a transition ministry answering principally to others may in fact end up with a duplication of effort, but worse, it may in fact contradict some of the things which have already been undertaken. And last of our concerns, and I think possibly the greatest of our concerns, is that it's a 0.5 full-time equivalent which is being suggested for Paisley Abbey. Now, no other congregation is being offered a 0.5 transition minister. The work of the Abbey is significant, and we don't think that 0.5 is sufficient capacity to continue that work. I'm not going to list the range of activities or the range of outreach activities that the Abbey is involved in. We have already submitted to the Planning Committee a copy of the motions that we'd intended to make this evening, but also the submissions which we think support those motions, and a variety of other documents which we think outline quite clearly the significant range, the myriad of pieces of work which are undertaken with our youth groups, our community outreach. But also, and again I was interested to hear the elder who spoke from Midkirk and Greenock talking about the civic responsibilities, because the civic responsibilities for Paisley Abbey are significant and extend beyond Renfrewshire. They extend to Inverclyde, sometimes into East Renfrewshire as well. Paisley Abbey is often used as the centre for commemoration and celebration by the lieutenancy as well as by the three councils. We also have
Can I ask
a number
you to come
of
to a close, please?
Yes,
Thank
we also
you.
have a number of staff. And our minister essentially is at the top of the pyramid and has to manage those staff. So taking all of these different elements and wrapping them together, we simply do not think that there is sufficient capacity in a 0.5 full-time equivalent for the next 5 years. In many respects, Moderator, we welcome what is happening this evening, because our principal motion, which we would otherwise have been making, was to ask for a moratorium on the decisions in respect of the Abbey. And we would certainly welcome as a Kirk session if members of the Planning Committee would come back and would consult more fully with us so that we might have a better understanding, because we think that there are better ways.
Excuse me, you have gone way beyond your time, and thank you very much. I think the Planning Committee have heard what you're saying.
Well,
thank you.
I'm glad, Moderator, because I think there are better ways for both the Abbey's ministry and the Presbytery's ministry to be pursued.
Thank you. I call on Jim Jack from Paisley West.
Madam Moderator, members of Presbytery. I'm the Session Clerk of Paisley West, and the elders have actually asked me to say to you that these long-distance unions don't work. They want Paisley West to go with Linwood. Between us and Linwood is a scheme called Fergusley Park. Most of the youth that are members of our youth organisations come from Fergusley Park. To get to the old St Ninian's Church, we're only talking of 0.8 miles. To get to Linwood Parish, the shortest route is 3.2 miles. No one is going to make that journey. There needs to be more discussion between all parties. The parish boundaries are crazy. They should be done away with and redone. In terms of taking on another building, when we already have the St Columba building, the manse for St Columba is sold. I know it was mentioned about the property that the church are going to have to dispose of. But the members of St Columba, when they joined us in union, they voted to do away with their building. They came to us at King Street. We still have the building. To add another building to that also creates the cost. Now, all the buildings we have are provisional B, and yet we've made that decision, and it has been, Presbytery was informed that we are all together in one building, but we still have one. As I've said, the parish boundary needs to be withdrawn. It needs to be restructured and drawn. I am in the fortunate position of having one of the town planning officers as a BB officer. And the young man says, the current plan as it stands does not work. We need to have these discussions with the representatives of Presbytery and between the different churches involved within this cluster to make sure that it works for us and it works for our congregations. If it doesn't work for the congregation, we don't have a church of any description. And I think that applies to everyone in here. The people are the church, and we need the people. Thank you.
Thank you, and also thank you for sticking to time, coming in under time, Jack. Just like to, sorry, Jim, sorry.
I'm used to being called that.
I've got a husband with interchangeable names, so can I just say, though, that in rural charges, there's a lot more than 3.5 miles between congregations. I've got 9 miles between my two, and for a rural congregation, that is a short distance. But thank you for your comments. I see that there are other folk here from Cluster C wishing to speak, so I ask you to come to the lectern, and we'll just go from my right to left, and if you introduce yourself to Presbytery. Thank you.
Moderator, Jessie Cross, Presbytery Elder, Paisley, Oakshaw, Trinity. The following are the 4 questions and comments in relation to the draft plan that Kirk Session wish me to bring. 1. In respect of parish boundaries, it is felt that having 2 areas of deprivation, i.e. Fergusley Park and Gallow Hill, would be too heavy a workload in one parish, even allowing for a pioneer minister. Can we confirm that Gallow Hill will be going to another parish? 2. If there is a change in the current pioneer minister, is there a guarantee that this post will be filled by another full-time equivalent minister? 3. Will the pioneer minister be allocated only to Fergusley Park, or would the job holder's job description allow the job holder to be used throughout the extended parish as required? 4. We would ask for it to be noted that our ministry and mission allocation is shown as £60,000. However, we also contribute to the extent of in excess of £20,000 to the United Reformed Church, who is our partner in the local ecumenical partnership and which contributes to our minister's stipend. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just clarify what you were asking in number 4 there?
We were just making a note.
Making a note, right, thank you, thank you. Anyone else from Cluster C? Thank you. Thank you, Jessie.
Moderator, my name is Graham Simpson. I'm the Session Clerk at Sherwood Green Law Church. I've been asked to comment on the plan by our Kirk Session. We fully understand the current shortage of ministers within the Church of Scotland and the need to plan the Church's mission going forward. But like many others, we are very concerned that this is a plan to manage the contraction of the Church rather than its growth. And accordingly, we've tabled 5 questions about the 5 marks of mission for Presbytery to answer. Firstly, in what ways is this good news? Secondly, how does it help us reach new people? Thirdly, how does the plan demonstrate a freeing up of existing patterns to create new ones, like team ministry? Fourthly, what evidence in this plan is tackling unjust structures? How will it encourage people, as we've heard so much this evening, who feel let down by the closure of their buildings? And fifthly, in what ways is this plan safeguarding the integrity of our creation? As a Kirk session, we are very concerned about the lack of consultation that has taken place so far, and we're therefore grateful that this meeting has become a consultation rather than a decision meeting. We are described in the draft plan as a healthy church. We have been fortunate to have had the ministry of John Murning for the last 8 years, building on the work of Alistair Cameron and Duncan McLaughlin before him. Prior to the pandemic, we were fully involved in the Path for Renewal project. We're deeply involved in our local parish community with schools and disadvantaged groups, and our buildings, like so many others, are used on a daily basis by a large number of youth and community groups. We were hard hit by the pandemic, as many have been, but we've been able to develop live streaming to a digital audience, and our numbers in face-to-face worship are continuing to recover well. I'm quite sure that St Mark's Old Hall could say exactly the same things about themselves. The idea of a future union of Sherwood Greenlaw and St Mark's Old Hall had been raised in the previous Paisley and Greenock Presbytery plan. Both congregations were approached about this at the time of the last vacancy in St Mark's in 2019. After brief discussion, both parties were of the view that St Mark's should be allowed an unrestricted call. Presbytery concurred, and the Reverend Sonia Blakesley was duly appointed. Both churches are therefore in the fortunate position of having established ministries. At this point in time, we have no indication that either Sonia or John intend to retire or have been called elsewhere or are likely to do so within the timescale of this plan. Since the draft Presbytery plan was published in June, both sessions have discussed its contents. A small group of office bearers from the 2 churches met in August and again in September, the second time with a single representative from Presbytery. The revised text of the draft plan has been based on that second meeting without further promised consultation. Although our meetings have been amicable and we have agreed to work together going forward, as yet neither group has a clear understanding of all of the life and work of the other, as in truth we've been largely living in our separate bubbles until now. If we do not fully understand each other as 2 congregations, then we do not see how Presbytery can understand us either. We at Sherwood Greenlaw believe that much more work needs to be done to understand the current position of the church in East Paisley and the best way forward for the future. We have therefore proposed alternative language for the plan, which accepts that Presbytery intends to allocate 1 full-time Minister of Word and Sacrament post to the area in future, but gives the respective sessions and congregations the opportunity to discuss this in much more detail and to work together along with Presbytery to determine the best shape of the future ministry and mission in East Paisley. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Graham. Anyone else from Cluster C?
Moderator Stuart Davidson, Pioneer Minister for the Presbytery and also Interim Moderator at Paisley North Church. Paisley North Church has already submitted a 4-page document reply to the draft, to the second draft plan. What I'm about to share is just a more succinct version of that. Within that document, there's a lot of details in relation to items in the plan which are mentioned in terms of various amber reports and things that we felt were incorrect. Paisley North Church seems to have slipped through the net. I'm not quite sure why. Well, actually, I am sure why now, thanks to the visitation team who kindly sent a member of the team to us last Thursday night. So that's the first time we had met anyone from the planning team in relation to the plan in order to give kind of face-to-face feedback. I have the reasons for that, as I say, and I believe them to be genuine, and it's no one's fault, just basically down to sheer amount of work involved, given the fact that folks are ministers as well. These are the thoughts of Paisley's North Church's Kirk session. We wrongly assumed that all the recent work of unions in terms of Paisley North, South, West, etc. were the outworking of the plan. We obviously were wrong with that, and in many ways tonight I come to you in a different vein, one that I don't think I've heard so far, and it is purely this, that the congregation of Paisley North Church are bewildered by the plan. They are also in a position of being in sorrow and in pain as a congregation due to the number of unions and church closures that have happened in the last 5 years. 3 in particular, St James's, St Ninian's and Sandyford. And if you remember rightly, that involved the breakup of a union and then another union. So the folks are really at a loss, genuinely at a loss with the Church of Scotland. The Union of Paisley North Church has, we can understand, a reduction in the number of people coming across into the Union. We reckon it's probably about a third. So far we've lost members just by being united, and basically we just don't want to go through that again. Some of the content of the plan, unfortunately, seems to be incorrect and unhelpful in relation to figures. The place of the current building is genuinely no one's fault, other than a result of history of the closures, previous closures that have happened in the town of Paisley. The current proposal to unite Paisley North Church with Oakshott Trinity, we do believe, is not any more advantageous than the place of the current building, used well by the church and by community groups. We do recognise the pressures upon the wider church, and yet we believe that there are further missional opportunities to be had, along with the developments taking place in Paisley Town Centre. We believe that the opportunities for the church to be more missional in the wider area that already is Paisley North Church's parish. Our halls are well used, regular maintenance of the buildings over a number of years, and the recent sale of the Sandyford building means that Paisley North Church is a viable congregation. We ask for Presbytery to take more time, and we're glad tonight that we've been given more time to have a conversation with the visiting team and to see where we might go for here. We have got ideas in relation to Pioneer Ministry, ideas in relation to a number of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for also the reminder that you mentioned you've already sent in your questions and the issues you wish addressed to Presbytery, and anybody who's not already done so and has spoken tonight, please do so. Jessie, I think that the questions you have asked are so pertinent to Oakshott Trinity that these will be addressed in the future consultation. Thank you. If there's no one else from Cluster C, we move on to Cluster D, and I call upon the previous moderator to come and moderate for a moment. I'll get some water as well while I'm away. No, I need to go, please. Okay, apparently I've been given advice from the business convener that we will just have a pause. Could I invite Cluster D to come forward, those who wish to speak in Cluster D? Has God been gracious?
Sorry?
Has God been gracious?
No, I think there'll be more coming. I would just get started. So.
Even though the clerk's not here?
Don't worry. Who's going to go to the toilet?
Probably.
I don't think he has to be here.
He's not in the room. Well, when I say he's not in the room, I don't mean the clerk.
There he is. He's coming in.
Right, okay, right.
Right, I would just move on because that's 25 to...
Okay, that's 25 to 8, and so we turn to Cluster D, and I firstly invite Martin Perry of Bearsden, Killermont to speak. Can you start a timer?
Yeah, can someone do the timing?
Okay, my name is Martin Perry. I'm the session clerk at Killermont Parish Church in Bearsden. Just want to say thank you for the opportunity for being able to speak, and we also welcome the extension of this consultation period, and hope that addition will add to the quality of the decision making around the draft report and improve it. At Killermont, our Kirk session wants to be engaging with this draft. We are a people who want to embrace change and have shown that already through our mission work. One of the main outcomes was to consider a union with Westerton Church, and we've already begun to embrace that with some conversations with them. However, we have one or two questions to raise. Our session on board was concerned about the severe reduction in ministries allocation within Bearsden. Now, as recently as June 2022, Presbytery was proposing a reduction in the Bearsden ministries from 5 to 4, and in Mulgai from 3 to 1.5. But the draft proposal now puts forward a suggestion of Bearsden from 5 to 3, that's a 40% reduction, and from Mulgai from 3 to 2, a 33% reduction. But in fact, we consider that this doesn't accurately reflect the impact of one change contained within the draft report, which is the uniting of Baljaffrey and St Luke's, which in effect reduces the allocation for Bearsden down to 2.5 from 5 ministries currently, and then from Mulgai from 3 to 2.5. So there's quite a significant reduction, 50% for Bearsden and Mulgai of 16%. And we'd like to clarify the justification for such a radical difference between these two commuter towns. However, it's easy to ask questions, but we also want to put forward a solution, which we hope would gain some traction with Presbytery. First, that the outcome of a union is progressed between Killermont and Westerton, that would be one ministry, with a worship centre at Killermont, as the draft suggests. But both the PMP groups at Westerton and Killermont are keen to explore opportunities for missional use of the Westerton building. It's very easy to withdraw from an area, but very different to pick that footprint back again. And so we would like to have some time to look at that opportunity, to define it against some clear criteria, and to have a deadline for that progress before any disposal order would be acted, as Westerton's building is currently Category B. The second proposal is that Bearsden Cross and New Kilpatrick progress towards a union, but you'll see that the church rolls in these two churches are particularly large. And instead of one ministry, we would recommend that two ministries be put forward for these areas with perhaps a team approach, while still rationalising and repurposing the buildings so that there would be some change there. In terms of the third proposal of a union with Baljaffrey and St Luke's, we again would support that move, but would recommend that the parish of St Luke's is not transferred to other Mulgai churches, but instead that geographical area comes with the people and becomes an entirely new parish joined with the Baljaffray parish. So that would be one ministry, 0.5 from Bearsden and 0.5 from Milngavie. That would leave one further ministry allocation within the 5 bracket to be allocated to Cairns and St Paul's Baldernick in Milngavie, which could also progress to Union. And this was foreshadowed in the draft report as an aim, and we think rather than delay that, it would be more appropriate to be considering that at this stage. So these are the main concerns we have and some suggestions. We would, however, just want to reiterate that we would like Time and Killamont to consider those Westerton buildings along with the Westerton team for potential missional use and be given some time to consider those proposals. Thank you, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Martin, and I'm sure that your comments will be considered under further consultation. Thank you. Can I call Alistair Burrows from New Kilpatrick Parish Church?
Alistair Burrows, Session Clerk, Bearsden, New Kilpatrick. Our Kirk Session has decided that we cannot support this plan, not only because we think the proposal to unite with Bearsden Cross is flawed, but because we think the plan itself is flawed. We would not presume to have a view on individual proposals for other clusters, but we offer some thoughts on the plan as a whole. And generally, I would be in sympathy with most of the comments which have been made so far this evening. The introduction to this plan is a big improvement on the consultative draft, but the plan itself still fails to be smart. It's not specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and it's certainly not time-based. We have made this point before in consultations. This is no more than a proposal to keep doing what we are doing at the moment with fewer resources, and that's a recipe for continuing decline. When we suggested that the plan should set out Presbytery's strategy for mission, the response was that we all knew what the mission of the church was and had no need to articulate it. In the event, the plan comments that different congregations have different understandings of mission and articulates a vision for the indeterminate future which will allow all those various understandings to continue, rather than setting out what Presbytery aims to achieve in the 5 years of this plan. While the idea to create a fund to support mission projects is commendable, some clarity over what will attract support would be useful from the perspectives both of those contributing to the fund and those applying for support from it. The plan goes straight from introduction to proposals about clusters. The strategy behind the proposals for each cluster is not articulated. Congregations which have been relocated to growth areas find themselves being proposed for union and closure with no explanation offered. And finally, on this point, the plan proposes a number of unions eventually, which is a recipe for paralysis. What do we do while we wait for the eventuality to arrive? Human nature suggests we will do nothing. In conclusion, the plan lacks empathy. We have been appalled at the way the process has treated ministers and employees, and that's not necessarily down to the way the Presbytery has done this, but we've expressed that more fully in our written response. Turning briefly to Cluster D, the proposal that eventually there will be 3 churches in Bearsden with 3 ministers and 1 church in Milngavie with 2 ministers. A union of Bearsden Cross with New Kilpatrick is suggested. Using the figures in the draft plan will give a congregation of just under 1,600 people with 1 minister. My impression of the plan proposals is that the average congregation after the proposed unions will be about 300 or so. So the plan expects 1 person to minister to over 5 times as many people as his or her colleagues. On the plan numbers, the single Milngavie church will have a congregation of just over 1,000 with an allocation of 2 ministers. What rationale is offered for this discrepancy of approach? None. The Cross New Kilpatrick Union is to take place in a repurposed suite of buildings. We think we know what is intended, but perhaps more care might be taken with the wording, not sure about repurposing churches, which implies another use. And again, no explanation to either congregation as to why or how or what the plan thinks needs to be done in repurposing the suite of buildings. I would have thought that the imbalance in Presbytery caused by the existing strength in numbers in the Bearsden and Mulgai congregations might have counselled caution about proposing unions which create even larger churches. But I suggest that Presbytery should think carefully whether it is in the interests of anyone concerned to create a mega church. On the figures proposed by the Treasurer for Presbytery dues, this one congregation in Bearsden will be contributing 12% of Presbytery's income, which I suggest is not very healthy. In short, Moderator, New Kilpatrick found itself unable to support the draft plan for many reasons other than our local concerns. We recognise the need to change, we would embrace it, and we would welcome a genuine dialogue about how we continue to tell the good news. Regrettably, in our view, this draft is an opportunity missed and a failure to respond to the call for radical action. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Alistair. And I call on Ewan Miller from Westerton. Okay, and my next, the next person I haven't wanting to speak is Shaw Anderson, brackets if required. Are you speaking on his behalf?
I am indeed, Moderator. Last-minute changes, things crop up with family and what have you. I'm Ramsay Shields, I'm Minister at St Luke's Church in
We
Mulgai.
couldn't forget.
Well, I readily do and others do. I am forgettable. I realise that myself. Moderator, St Luke's are grateful to the Planning Committee for this further period of consultation. We're grateful to Ken for visiting our Kirk session, and I think tonight we just want the reassurance that our written submission has been passed on to the Planning Committee, which we know it has, but we're looking for that assurance. I don't have much to say tonight at all. Really just to say that we are firmly of the belief that the parish should not be split, and that further consideration is given to the strategic site on which we find ourselves in Mulgai. We are distanced about 3/4 of a mile from the centre, where the other two churches are. We moved there for the purposes of mission way before my time. We are in a strategic place for mission. We are in the part of Mulgai that is growing most, and it makes no sense to us to retreat from that site, whether it be in the present building or otherwise, or we look at other possibilities. We are, in fact, open to readjustment. We're not close to that at all. But the one thing we would ask the Planning Committee to consider is our parish, which we have worked hard over a number of years, the site on which we find ourselves, and the assurance that the Planning Committee will take these things on board. Oh, one other thing, yes. We'll talk about money and resources here. We believe that given our position, we should be given an allocation of full-time equivalence ministry in Mulgai, whether that be shared with another congregation or otherwise. But we reckon that our position and our work is worth that. Thank you very much, Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramsay. I can assure you that your comments have been passed on to the Planning Committee and will be dealt with in due course. Linford Ice from Clyde Bank, Kilbow, St Andrews.
Good evening, Moderator, Clerk, members of Presbytery. I'm Linford Ice and I speak on behalf of the congregation of Kilbow St Andrews Church, Clyde Bank. I begin by saying that at last night's Kirk session meeting, the elders concurred with Presbytery's plan for the proposed triple union. However, we ask the Presbytery to reconsider the designated category assigned to Kilbow St Andrews building, retaining it and waterfront both as category B, provisional for the time being, with a view to subsequently categorising Kilbow St Andrews as category A. Kilbow St Andrews Church has the largest adult congregation of any church in Clydebank. It therefore has the biggest congregation of the 3 churches in the proposed union. It is logistically unusual to displace the larger congregation. It could therefore be perceived that the decision is purely a financial one, without cognizance being taken of the many positive attributes Clyde St Andrews Church has. The cost of repairing Clyde St Andrews is cited as a reason for closure. The repairs to our church do not require to be undertaken all at once. A phased programme of repair refurbishment is feasible, and grants from a variety of sources are available to help defray some of the cost. We also own our own manse, and there are funds held in Edinburgh on our behalf which could be drawn, as there is no restriction on their use. We have commissioned a detailed survey of our building to ascertain the exact cost of the repair work. Designating our building B provisional for now will allow for the survey report to be received and considered. This will also give Presbytery the option of changing its mind when more information is available to you. Decisions of the magnitude set out in the draft mission plan should be informed by the most up-to-date and accurate data available. The Church of Scotland is its membership, and we should be regarded as more important than figures and business plans. Otherwise, the Church becomes just that, a business without regard for its people. The current proposal in the draft mission plan would mean that there would be no Church of Scotland building in the middle of the town, between Faithfully and the far end of Clydebank. Church of Scotland membership is declining, and the current proposal is likely to further reduce congregational numbers and discourage attendance, especially as we have the largest congregation with more people to displace. The Church of Scotland would also lose its presence in a prime location in Clydebank. Clyde St Andrews provides that presence. Clyde St Andrews Church is situated on one of Clydebank's main arterial roads, thus occupying a very prominent site. It is therefore the prime location to optimise the Church of Scotland's mission within the town. We have been a significant and very well-established Christian presence in Clydebank for 125 years. The church's location at the top of the hill means it is easily accessible by public transport, both rail and bus. There are bus stops less than 100 yards from the church door, and Singer railway station is nearby. We have ample free parking in and around the church, plus a purpose-built car park. There is ongoing redevelopment in the vicinity where many new houses are being built. Clyde St Andrews is in a superior location with better accessibility and visibility to optimise the Church of Scotland's mission in Clydebank. We are a solution-focused, forward-thinking congregation. As such, we were the first church in Clydebank to reopen after lockdown. This we did without a full-time minister. There was an obvious need and desire for people to get back to in-person worship. We met that need on a weekly basis. When numbers were restricted, we always achieved the permitted number with a waiting list. We currently have a traditional Sunday service, usually conducted by a visiting minister. This is always well attended, and numbers have returned to pre-pandemic levels. Our congregation is participatory in the delivery of worship. Members enthusiastically participate in the delivery of Sunday services when pulpit supply is unavailable. A rotation of congregants also willingly deliver the reading during morning worship. All office bearer roles within the church are filled. Our convenient location within the town means that our watch night service, for example, is very well attended by people in the local community as well as by our members. Amongst those attending, there are people for whom the festive period can be a difficult time. We have an excellent reputation within the community for providing a welcoming atmosphere, which helps bring comfort to those in such circumstances.
Lynn, in the interest of fairness, can I ask you to reach your conclusion, please?
Children are the future of the church, and we have over 100 children who come through our church on a weekly basis through a variety of uniformed organisations. We're also very involved in outreach within the Clydebank area, and we have the Clydebank Blitz Chapel in our church, and that...
I have to ask you to come to draw to an end. Sorry. Thank you.
And that is something that we would like to retain, and it's very important to the people of Clydebank. So in conclusion...
Thank you. Sorry. Can I just say, going back to the comments we had earlier about be provisional, I don't want to speak to a specific charge, but my understanding is that the be provisional is to allow you time to do what you're asking to do to your church. Okay, so I just want to give you that reassurance and the reassurance that we've heard the other things that you have said this evening. I notice that there are other folks from...
On your point that you've just spoken to?
Yes.
Can I...
If it's a question, yes.
The new draft plan that we've recently received changed the assignment of an A recommendation from the submission of the Presbytery representatives who had visited in Clyde Bank. I understand, and so do the elders, that matters would be discussed and the planning committee might need to consider matters brought to their attention, and that's the way these things go. What caused considerable distress and concern for the elders at Waterfront Church and the congregation too was that there was no communication of the change from the submission to the entry in the plan. When you make a categorical statement, a very clear statement that says it's for this reason, then it really
It is my understanding that...
It's important that the planning committee make clear in advance of decisions what's going on, because it creates real problems within congregations that presbyters might understand. And the use of the B provisionality is, it means under the Act, it's A or B, and a B is closed. That's not the intention. There should be more explanation of it. It's a failure to communicate, and it's not quite as easy as I think you were suggesting it has been practiced. So I'd ask you to bear that in mind, if you would be so good.
Thank you. Anybody else from Cluster D wishing to speak? Oh, yes, so I saw the hand first. So I'll go back along the... Yes. Okay. Yes.
Your moderator, I'm Bill Doherty. I'm the Presbytery Elder of Baldernock Parish Church. At present, we are linked with St Paul's Mulgai and have no minister due to the retirement of our minister due to ill health. Baldernock Parish Church is a small rural church based in the parish of Baldernock and surrounded by farmland and green fields. The present church was opened in 1795. The church hall and the small local school are the only public buildings in the area. The church was recently linked with St Paul's Mulgai, a much larger church positioned in the centre of a residential area of Mulgai. To give an idea of the disparity in size, we have been awarded 13.5% of the vacancy allowance against 86.5% for St Paul's. The linkage has worked well. Members of Baldernock have joined the St Paul's Baldernock Guild and Men's Association. Some joint services have been held. For example, the Christmas Day service is being held this year in St Paul's and the New Year's service at Baldernock. The Baldernock Kirk Session has met and unanimously opposed a union with St Paul's for the following reasons. The closure of Baldernock would mean the end of all Christian worship in the parish. It is doubtful if many of our members would wish to make the journey to St Paul's, a complete contrast to our small local church, and the congregation would simply fade away. Baldernock Church is a pivotal point for the local community, and they would be devastated by its closure. It is envisaged that the church building would close with the union. The building is in excellent order, with no repairs needing to be carried out. The substantial sum received from the sale of our manse is being put to good use, with £60,000 currently being spent on new windows. It is doubtful if the church could be sold in view of its position. Would it simply be allowed to rot away for all to see? The session cannot see why the linkage should not continue. Surely in this day and age, it is not unreasonable for a new minister to look after two churches. The session wished to reinvent Baldernock as a mission-led church within the Church of Scotland, and our ideas were set out in the mission audit response. Unfortunately, we could not progress matters due to the long illness of our minister, now retired, but we are confident with our new minister at St Paul's Baldernock we can move forward. Alas, we fear that with a union this will not be possible. We shall accordingly be requesting a meeting with the Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for being so succinct. It is much appreciated. Bill, sorry, I misheard. I apologise, Bill.
Absolutely.
I need to have my ears cleared out, don't I? Anyone else from Cluster C? Thank you. Yes. D, wherever we are.
Liz Stewart, Interim Moderator for Dundalk Trinity. Moderator, I would like to speak about the proposed union of Dundalk Trinity with Faithfully Parish Church. I wish to do this because we believe the union to be the wrong decision. Our preferred union would be with Old Kilpatrick Bowling and Dalmuir Barclay. I could stand here and justifiably argue a case for Dundalk Trinity to stay open. Dundalk Trinity is and has been in the heart of Dundalk since the mid-1800s. I am certain that many members of Dundalk Trinity are hoping I'm going to do just that, as it is a strong church with elders who go out their way to support their ageing congregation and especially their housebound members. This is faith in action. However, at this stage of the plan, we have to be realistic about the future of Dundalk and many other churches in Clyde Presbytery. At Dundalk, we have been realistic about the positive and negative attributes of the church for the last few years, and in fact had been proactive before COVID and instigated meetings with other churches in the area. So, earlier this year, with the proposed congregation visits, the AMBA building reports, etc., we all agreed that Dundalk, although being a beautiful church, is, in today's words, the right building in the wrong place. We understand it is not easily accessible, so is a candidate for possible closure. Also, it's recognised, as with most churches, we have an ageing congregation. After a church session and congregational visit from our Presbytery Planning Group, a draft proposal went to the Presbytery Planning Committee, proposing that Dundalk Trinity should have a union with Faithfully Parish Church and form a new charge. A church session meeting was held where the proposal was voted on and unanimously rejected. A note of this decision was sent to Mr McHugh, notifying him of the vote and asking for due consideration to be given to a proposal for a union with Dalmuir Barclay and Kilpatrick. We asked that this be brought to the attention of the next planning meeting before the draft plan was sent out. The acknowledgement I got from Jack McHugh simply said that my email would be forwarded to Ken Gray for his attention, no mention of looking at the proposal. When the final draft plan was received, there was no change. The proposed union between Dundalk Trinity and Faithfully remained unchanged. A follow-up email was sent to Mr McHugh conveying our dismay and disappointment that it appeared that our proposal had not been considered or possibly not even brought up at the Planning Committee meeting. No acknowledgement to a me email was received. All throughout this process, church sessions and congregations were involved, indeed encouraged to take part in the conversations to try to reach amicable unions and possible closures of churches in the clusters. However, acknowledgements are not the issue here, though. It is the decisions being made, whether they are right or wrong decisions. Presbytery are good at making right decisions, but they also have made wrong decisions. And for Dundalk Trinity and Faithfully to form a union is a wrong decision. Let me explain. Linkages, some worked and are good for many years. Toker Trinity was in a linkage with St Cuthbert's, and this was a good linkage and worked very well. The linkage only ended because St Cuthbert's closed as the congregation numbers had fallen and the maximum attending some weeks were as few as 12. Although it was very sad to see the church close, the elders and the congregation were tired and ready for the church to close and unite with Abbotsford to become Waterfront. That was a union that worked, both church sessions and congregations agreeing. That is an example of a linkage that worked and then a union that worked, and that is really because the congregation and the minister wanted it to work. Linking Dumbarton, St Andrews and Old Kilpatrick Bowling was a wrong decision, and the linkage did definitely not work. Everyone knew it wasn't working and it was a wrong decision, but it took quite a number of years for that linkage to be severed. What I am saying is, a wrong linkage can be severed, a union can't. A union that has been put through against the will of a session and congregation is a wrong decision and will not work. The planning committee have not listened at all. I can only imagine if I was in a congregation or indeed a minister and the Presbytery were going to force a union of another church onto us. A challenge, yes, but
Liz, can I ask you to come to a conclusion,
yes,
please?
But what a nightmare. Some of you may say sitting there, bring it on, that it's a challenge, but it shouldn't come to that. Sessions should be listened to. A few of the congregation.
You, Liz. Thank you. In the interest of fairness.
Thank you for listening.
And your comments will be noted by the planning committee.
I'll send it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from Cluster D?
I speak on behalf of Bearsden. Oh, I was guessing there. I do apologise. I'm Douglas Thompson, an elder of Bearsden Cross Church. You have heard from my friends at New Kilpatrick, my friends at Killamont. You also, in the planning group, have received the comments of Bearsden Cross Church. There is a lot of commonality in the views in and around Bearsden. I was simply wanting to come here and say that the plan that we have is actually a burnout plan as it affects Bearsden Cross and New Kilpatrick churches. Congregation of 1,600 approximately. It is a huge workload, and workload has not, I think, been considered in the plan whatsoever. The churches in Bearsden, in particular New Kilpatrick and the Cross Church, have been working together. We have discussed plans. We are keen to explore what we want to do, but what we want to do must surely be able to be done with the correct number of ministers to help us achieve what we're planning for the future. Everything else is in our paper. I think that's me.
Thank you very much for being so succinct, Douglas. Roddy. As Roddy's coming up, can I just say thank you to whoever decided to put the heating back on.
Roddy Hamilton, the Minister in New Kilpatrick Parish. Moderator, one of the things that hasn't been mentioned but might help as we continue to develop and consult with the plan is the audits. Strikes me there is no real missional vision here in the plan and just a unions and readjustments plan. And I wonder if that is partly because the audits haven't been used properly. We are pitching against each other tonight and competing for resources that to continue to do what we have always done. And I think the audits are a good idea. It might be in a minority there, but I think they're a good idea. They identify a lot, but they're not to be used to compare one parish against another, nor to discover that one parish does this and the other parish down the road does something sort of like that, and we'll just get them to join together. We miss a huge creative and missional opportunity here. If the audits are used properly, the Planning Committee will notice that if a couple of congregations are doing a particular thing that's similar, there is a need to shape the plan round resourcing those needs, because that is the need of the community, of the parishes there. And the Planning Committee can give a reason for that, that why they are going to resource those particular assets or needs in a community. The plan then becomes a response to the assets, to the people, to our neighbours, to God's agenda in our parishes, and not just keep things going as they are. And as you continue to consult Planning Committee, please use the audits more and design a plan around resourcing the kind of ministry and outreach that these audits have identified. That might mean reshaping parish boundaries and getting rid of them altogether, which would be my favourite option. It might mean stating that Presbytery will resource a specific kind of ministry that is purpose-driven for a particular area. It might mean calling ministers to a specific work that plays to their strengths and not become jack of all trades, because if you look at my trades, I'm the YTS in all of them. It might mean a plan designed to work in partnership, ecumenically, but also with secular organisations as well. It will certainly mean getting rid of Article 3 ultimately, and it would be great if the Planning Committee would be able to lead Presbytery in removing that article ultimately. I'd like to invite the Planning Committee to explore the audits far more thoroughly, so we are not creating a unions and readjustments plan, and one rather designed genuinely for mission that allows all people to engage creatively, which is not used that often, in partnership, which is not done that often, and targeted, which we don't talk about very often, to the needs of our communities or our parishes, so the kingdom begins to transform the relationships that we have with all our neighbours. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Roddy. Anyone else from Cluster D? Thank you. Can I say you only have 4 minutes, I'm afraid, because we are running out of time.
Moderator, I'm moderator and interim moderator of 3 charges in Clydebank and Old Kilpatrick. I'm expecting to be able to speak to each of those.
We are running out of time. We've got 4 minutes left for this.
Moderator,
for this cluster.
I don't think that's reasonable. I think I've got 3 congregations, each with specific needs, and I think it's quite reasonable to speak to them. If they were in a different cluster, I'd have been able to do so, I expect.
And there would be other congregations that chose not to speak in other clusters. We kept the time for the other clusters. I think it is only fair, and you have the opportunity to submit your comments to the Planning Committee in writing. Ironically,
Moderator, what I would like to address is communication of the Planning Committee. Waterfront Parish Church.
Yes, sorry, just to bear in mind that we will have a guillotine and you can come back at the end.
Thank you, Moderator. Can you remind me where I was?
Just start again.
Waterfront Parish Church had a communication advising them of the status within Clydebank and what was intended for them. They found when they received the draft plan that had changed and their building was provisionally B. The lack of communication caused the distress and concern that the Kirk Session wrote to the Presbytery Clerk to express within the Planning Committee. I'm looking for a commitment that there will be better communication in the coming period of consultation. And similarly, in Faithfully, having heard the news of Dundalker's intention to look for union elsewhere, I have no personal disagreement with what they're seeking to do. I would have welcomed the challenge of being the minister in such a move to press on to the union, but neighbours and my brothers and sisters in Dundalker are entitled to seek their own their own desire to involve themselves in the mission to Clydebank their way. However, in this coming period of consultation, I would hope that the committee speak to Faithfully about what will become of their place within the plan at an early date, so there is plenty of time for communication, explanation, and for the opportunity to see relationships not damaged but actually built up. Thank you, Moderator.
And as I say, you have the opportunity to come back after the other clusters are considered. Thank you, Gregor. I have no intimation of anybody from Cluster E wishing to speak, but if there are, could you please come forward now? That's fine.
I did give indication. Moderator was meeting representatives, Europe Presbytery, so
Oh, I've always been there. It's nothing new. Yeah, it's a very long list. Okay, I invite... That gives me time to do my maths.
My name is Kim O'Neill and I am the Presbytery Elder for Bonhill Parish.
Can you repeat your name, please? Sorry, we didn't hear.
Kim O'Neill.
Thank you, Kim.
Moderator, thank you for allowing us to speak this evening. At the last session meeting, Bonhill Session decided to accept the proposed retention of the current linkage, along with the appointment of a transition minister, to help the two congregations work more closely together, whilst at the same time leading us towards an ultimate union with our neighbours in Kilmarnock, Cartaharn and Lomond, as suggested by Presbytery. However, the session wanted me to convey that it was with sadness and reluctance that we accept the Presbytery's proposal, because we do not see it as the best option for the Vale of Leven. Two united churches, one in the north and one in the south, with two full-time ministers, could work together with greater strength within the community. The proposed retention of a linkage came as a surprise to us, given that it was stated in the original document from Presbytery that linkages would no longer be an option. The time constraints imposed on us by Presbytery and the fact that we don't have a full-time minister have meant that the Kirk Session have had very little time to consider the proposal or investigate any alternative options. In particular, we had not heard of the position of transition minister before it was stated as part of the proposed plan. And we only received clarification on some points yesterday, and therefore have had no time to take these back to our session to ensure their full understanding. We cannot conceive that Presbytery is willing to gain consent where full understanding has not been established. We're also saddened that the church that we've been linked with for 12 years do not feel able to form a union with us. And we would have welcomed some time to get together after our August meeting to understand each other's thoughts, but this was not encouraged. However, we respect and accept their decision and take hope from the fact that we share a joint vision of moving forward side by side in faith towards an ultimate union of all the congregations in the Vale of Leven, led by a team ministry of two, to proclaim the word of God and serve his people in this area. To that end, we have asked Presbytery what help can be given to develop a strategy to lead us towards that ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Ian Miller, interim moderator at Lomond Parish Church and Kilmarnock Cartaharn. Moderator, I'm grateful to you and to the Presbytery for according me this opportunity to comment on the plan as it relates to Cluster E. It is forward-looking, with the expressed aim, as Kim has already said, of achieving the ultimate goal of one church in the Vale, and suggesting that as an interim step there be a union between Lomond and Gartaharn, a proposal which, you rightly say, is supported by both Kirk sessions. There is a caveat, however. That agreement was predicated on the basis that at least initially the two buildings would remain. Yet it looks to the Kirk session of Gartaharn when the union happens, the church there closes. And so with great regret, they have rejected the plan. I would plead tonight for a wee bit of wriggle room, with initially the two buildings remaining while options are reviewed during the run of the plan, or, as Jonathan said, a bit of staggering at Gartaharn. Can also refer to what was unanimously agreed as the ultimate aim, and Kim's referred to that as well. One organic union of four churches, and this was the positive message given to the Reverend Alistair Shaw when he met with us on the 16th of August. It was accepted for practical reasons that that could not happen immediately because team ministry was involved. So it was proposed that as an interim step, union at the top end and a similar at the bottom end of Bonhill Renton. Two new congregations working together to devise a mission plan for the whole area. Now, I know the Planning Committee feel that there is too much antipathy towards immediate implementation of the proposal, so transition ministry is proposed as Plan B to go to the end result. I still think the initial proposal given to Alistair should be reconsidered. I've lived there for 47 years. I love the place. I love the people. It's crazy. We can bowl together. We can golf together. We can drink together. We can socialise together. We're even in community enterprises together. But coming together as a church seems to be a problem. Alistair preached a fabulous sermon not so long ago, and most of you heard it. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? It was telling. And I'm sure all the congregations in the Vale that were there that day, when they heard the message, I hope they muttered underneath their breath, because we are Presbyterians after all, hallelujah, amen. The new era for the church may feel like a strange land. I still think we can sing that song. So, Jack, forgive me, but I ask, indeed I plead as an adopted Vale man, never completely accepted. Coming to Kilbarchan, there was always going to be questions asked. But might there still be time to get those congregations, 4 of them together, or just the 2 at the south, to see if we can work together? I'm sure at the sharp end of negotiations, when people are fighting for what they believe, they do see the steamroller coming towards them. And let's understand, under threat, temperatures can rise, maybe even to toxic levels. But let me say, that's not them. They're good people, every single one of them. Kilmarnock, Gartaharn, Lomond, Renton, Bonhill, they're good people. So always the optimist. I think there still can be a marriage of these 2 congregations in the south, listening together, compromising together as brothers and sisters in Christ. It would be a sad indictment in all of us if we really are incapable of that. May it be an opportunity for them and for the Presbytery to take a risk. Just like those fellows who left their nets to follow Jesus take a risk. And you know, when you think of it, without that risk, we wouldn't be here tonight. So in short, I plead for wriggle room or stagger room for Gartaharn building, and to reconsider the proposed union rather than transition ministry as the way forward for the Kirk and the Vale. However, I do applaud you, Kim, in suggesting that with reluctance, if there is no other way, you'll go forward. Moderator, Planning Committee, fellow presbyters, thanks for listening to me.
Thank you, Ian. Anyone else from Cluster E? Thank you. That means we can move on to Cluster F. Again, I have no intimation of anyone wishing to speak from Cluster F. Is there anyone wishing to speak from Cluster F? I'm still here. I just heard the questions, are anyone still here for Cluster F? There's a few. Therefore, Gregor, if you wish to come and speak to us again, you're in. Thank you, moderator. Time's passed. Thank you. We've come to the end of that. Jack, would you like to say anything in closing?
Moderator, thank you for this opportunity. It's been enlightening tonight to hear the comments. We didn't profess to get it right first time. We're human beings. I'm not making an excuse. I'm just facing up to the reality of the situation. But we have taken cognizance of all of your comments. We have them, most of them in black and white, as the moderator has requested. If you haven't submitted your comments in writing, please do so. And I can assure you that the Planning Committee will consider each and every one of them very, very carefully. And the last thing I would really like to say is that to aid this process to arrive at a point that's in accordance with God's will and purpose for this presbytery, I would ask you to keep praying for the Planning Committee as they seek to prepare a plan that we feel we can bring back for approval of presbytery. I personally have felt uplifted in prayer from my own congregation in Freeland Church and Bridge of Weir. There's people down in Gourock and Greenock, Port Glasgow, and further afield that have been holding us up in prayer. And I'm absolutely convinced that is absolutely essential, and presbytery itself. And I know most of you, many of you, will have been praying about this. Please continue to do so. We can only do this in God's strength and with God's wisdom. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Jack. And I underline that. Please continue to pray for the whole process and all of the congregations involved, all of us, and all members of the Planning Committee. In a change to item 16, we are now adjourned to meet for the purpose of approving the presbytery, the draft mission plan on Saturday, the 4th of February, at a time to be confirmed, and then on Tuesday, the 14th of February, both in 2023, for ordinary business, venue to be advised in due course, and that is true for both of those. Will you please stand? Go to love and serve the Lord by loving and serving the people God has called you to serve, and go above all, knowing that the blessing of God Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is resting upon you and dwelling within you all forever. Amen.